At this point, I'm just along for the ride. Hey, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 6 of Bungo Stray Dogs season 5. We're just at the halfway point, if you can believe it. We're just at the halfway point. And at this point in time, I'm not looking forward to, I am looking forward, but I'm not looking forward to any happy moments at this series. No. I always like to say, it's darkest before the dawn. Asagiri, we were talking in the comments, and the comments with everyone is very mixed at this point. The manga people are being quiet, as they should be, because they know. But even then, the manga's not done, right? So people have been commenting that they're like, well, maybe it'll end hopeful because, and I've got a comment that's going to talk about that, maybe it's going to end hopeful because that's kind of the message that Asagiri is saying. And then others are like, nah, he's going to end it really sad. And I'm like, and some people like unhappy endings and they're like, they find sad endings like refreshing or whatnot. This girl ain't one of them. I like a happy ending. I can do angst, but I gotta have a happy ending. And this is about as much angst as we're getting right now. Like, nothing good is happening. Fukuchi is a nightmare. BRAM is OP. The time-space continuum sword is hacks. Jono's gone. Akutagawa's turning everybody into vampires. It's just not good. And I don't feel like, we're only at the halfway point, I don't feel like it's over. The bad things happening are not over, and I'm dreading them. And I'm just like, at this point, I just take my coffee and go, whatever fresh hell Asagiri's gonna give us, I just need to accept it. And as one commenter, one patron, Dana, said, they're just reveling in my pain. I'm glad you guys are reveling in it, because it's there. It's a weird feeling, right? Because on the one hand, I'm dreading each episode because of the anguish and angst and pain it's giving me. But on the other hand, I want to know more and I want to keep watching because I want to see what happens. So we're on episode 56. Last episode was At the Port in the Sky Part 1. What port in the sky? I was like, what are we doing with this? We're at the airport, but that's not in the sky. So this is probably part 2 of that. Now the question is there going to be a part 3 or are we just getting part 2? That is the big question. We don't know that yet. But I do have a few comments before we start this episode. Sarah Linda pointed out that Fukuchi did try to recruit Fukuzawa back in the flashback in season 4. I had forgot about that. But Fukuzawa rejected him, saying he was going to work alone, which is really interesting. And my dogs are sitting there fighting over a toy in the floor, so why are we not surprised? But I forgot about that, and that's interesting. It almost makes me think that maybe Fukuchi feels a little bit betrayed because Fukuzawa was like, oh, no, I don't want to work with you. I'm working alone. And then, 6 months later, he has Rampo. And then, 6 months after that, there's the ADA, and Fukuchi's like, oh, well, were you really working alone, or did you just not want to work with me? It's one of those deals. So I find that interesting that he was recruited, but Fukuzawa said no. So that's fascinating. I'm like, did you get all yandere on us, Fukuchi? Is that what you did because you couldn't be with Fukuzawa? You went a little extreme. I'm just saying. Dark Moon B said that Aya Koda is a real life author. And I don't want to know any more. I was a little bit like, I told them in the comments, I was like, ugh, I kind of didn't want to know that because usually the people that are based on authors in the series are users of abilities. And so far, Aya doesn't have an ability. So I'm like, I didn't know if that was a hint at something. So I was getting a little bit like, oh no, are we getting into spoiler territory? And then they pointed out that the room that Aya was in spying on Fukuchi had no door or window, which I was like, wait, what? How did they get in there? So hopefully nothing has been spoiled and we're not going to find out she's like some ability user with some kind of crazy ability that gets activated or something, because then I'll be like, well, I knew it was coming. So hopefully that's not the case though. But I'm not going to research Aya because I don't usually research people based on authors unless they have an ability. So, and until that ability is named. So no, I'm not researching Aya Koda. But please, if you know that any characters in the series are based off real life authors and I have not researched them, but I've not made note of it, please do not tell me because I consider that a hint or a clue and I don't want to be spoiled. So just forewarning. I don't know if I said that this season or not, but it's been in the past like a rule of thumb. So Stacey did say that you pronounce it Aya. It's not Aya. It's Aya, kind of like Dazai. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm terrible at pronunciation. So anytime people can give me helpful clues and hints, that's very nice. So thank you, Stacey. Nintendo Girl 1832. Point out the 10 calamities. They were like, I don't know, but could Lovecraft have been a calamity? And I'm like, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, you know, the idea of Bram being immortal, that's kind of cool. And so then we have the idea of Lovecraft, who's basically a monster and immortal. So that should have been a sign too that we were going to have vampires in this story, because you have Lovecraft, who's a monster, like one of the like the Loch Ness monster, like not the Loch Ness monster, but like the bog monster, swamp monster, something. It's kind of one of those deals. And then you have Dracula. So that's kind of should have been forewarning that something like that could have happened, but I kind of like that. I like the theory of Lovecraft being a calamity. That's really cool. I'm not researching Bram Stoker yet. I kind of wanted Bram's ability to be named before I did that, but that's okay. Bram Stoker's pretty well known, so maybe after this episode, if we don't get anything, I'll definitely research Bram Stoker before the end of the season. Don't worry. But I might not do it yet. I like to hold off and wait until their ability gets like officially named. And I don't think with Bram it's been officially named yet. It's just turned people into zombies. So once we get the ability named, then we'll talk. But for now, Bram's just going to kind of wait in the wings. Kind of like Aya as well. And then finally, I like Dana's comment, because Dana was talking about reveling in my pain, which I'm sure many of you have. But also, I kind of like the way Dana was like, they think that there's going to be a hopeful ending, because that seemed to be Asagiri's message. It's sort of that darkness before the dawn. Sinners are interesting because they're people. And they talked about how Dazai earlier on in season 4, or earlier on in the season, was telling Fyodor that it's the people that howl, the people that fight against the cruelty of the world, that are so interesting and are better than any of them. And I was like, that's so cool. And I like the way that Dana worded it as, Bungo Stray Dogs is about the absurdity and irrationality of the world. It's about living despite that and going against the cruelty of the world. And I was like, oh, I love that, because Fukuchi, you know, he's very nihilistic and seems to kind of lean into the world is awful and we should just make people pay. But Dazai is like a living proof of, yes, the world can be awful, but that doesn't mean it has to be that way all the time. And it doesn't mean that people can't change. And Dazai is living proof of that, right? So, and Odo is living proof of that. So I like that. And so I'm really hopeful that Asagiri is going to make this as dark and depressing as it can get. And then somehow they're going to make it better. I don't know how. Natsumi's probably like the ultimate trump card. Natsumi's just like snaps his fingers, like twists his cat tail, and then everything turns back in time. Maybe Natsumi can control time. Who knows? He is a cat. As if cats control time, right? And then also, Dana pointed out that Jono is blind. And I was like, Jono is blind. And they were talking about how it was kind of weird in the episode, because Jono is blind, but they have really heightened senses. So it makes sense that Jono kind of masks the fact that they're blind by using their senses to like know where things are. But there were several points in the last episode where Jono was like looking at Aya, like looking around, where a blind person would never do that. I know a person who is blind. They don't look around like that. And so I'm like, okay. But whatever. We were also talking about how Asagiri is, as many consider, a more character-driven writer than a plot-driven writer. I'm all about character-driven stories. It's why I like Bungo Stray Dogs so much, because it's very character-driven and character-focused. So it's fine. Like, little notes about that with Jono and the blindness. Like, I can let that sort of stuff slide. The hacks bit with Fukuchi is really trying me, but I'm letting it go because Fukuchi is interesting. So, but yeah, y'all. I feel like I have to get my wits about me in these episodes, because they really make your brain hurt because you're just sitting there like, So, but you know what? It's fine. We've got Bram Stoker to research later. We've got Aya to research later. We'll just wait on those. It's okay. That'll give me something fun to do if things get too sour and depressing, and we'll just go from there. So I'm really excited for this episode. I've talked for nearly 10 minutes. I'm not gonna waste any more of your time, but I hope you all really enjoy this reaction episode. I've held off to the last minute to watch this, but now we can't. So I guess we'll just see what happens, right? But we're going to start episode 6 of Bungo Stray Dogs season 5. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's double check, make sure we got subtitles, turn that sound on, And let's do it to it, Lars. Oh, Fukuchi, my friend, you messed up. All you had to do was give Bram some headphones. I loved this episode. Oh my God. Well, I mean, there's some shit going down, and there's a lot of things, a lot of elements of the episode that I'm like, oh, well, why are we doing this? This seems like a bad idea. But Dazai. But other than that, I'm like, Bram and Aya, best duo ever. Bram and Aya, no, they are like, what is the platonic version of an OTP? Platonic version of an OTP? Is it like one true platonic pair? Can we do OTPP? OTPP? Can we do that? I have never wanted something more than Bram and Aya to be friends. Oh my God. It was like the Billy and Mandy and the Grim Reaper vibes, where the Grim Reaper's like, I'm the Grim Reaper of destruction. And they're like, yeah, okay, cool. I was just like, I'm going to fangirl and rave about that dynamic and those parts of the episode so much. So I hope y'all are ready for me to just jump up and down, be so excited, because I needed some levity. The last 5 episodes have been nonstop, no levity. The jokes, you're like, you're trying to be funny, but it's really disturbing. It's been like that. And I love seeing Fukuchi squirm. I love it. I'm a little worried about Fukuchi squirming because he seems to go off the deep end real quick, where he's like, if I can't get this box open, I'll just destroy the world. And I'm like, whoa, Fukuchi, let's slow down for a hot second. Let's wait a minute. Let's think about our actions before we do something we're going to regret. And then, God, no. There was so much about this episode that I loved. There's so many screen caps I'm going to take. I freaking loved it. The only thing I didn't love is that, where were the subtitles? Where were the subtitles for the little boxes? They weren't there. And I was like, I had subtitles in English on. They weren't translated. I'm like, Crunchyroll, Bones, what we doing? So I'm hoping that in the Discord or in the comment section, people are like, oh no, here's what happened. And I'm like, okay, good. I'm sure it wasn't anything of much importance, but man, I loved this episode. This was great. This is exactly what I needed. And we start off the episode just with the title page. I didn't think we were going to get the OP. I didn't think we were going to get the OP or the ED, if I'm honest, because we cut straight to the title and that was it. I was like, okay, we're not going to get an OP. We're not going to get an ED. That's going to be the end of it. But thank goodness I was like, also, I guess I understand why Fukuchi would not check Bram's coffin, because who would hide in the coffin with Bram? Who would hide? Well, a 10-year-old girl would. So, Dark Moon commenting, I am very sorry. We talked in the comment section before I started this discussion. They replied to my comment and whatnot. So I apologize. I don't know. She's apparently not an ability user, which is great. And I apologize because I forgot that Mushitaro, his author friend, was also a famous author listed, but did not have an ability either. So thank you for clarifying that. I always get nervous, though, when people say stuff like that, because I've been spoiled before and it's jaded me for life. So I'll forever be paranoid, right? So let's talk about Aya. Aya and Bram. They're going to be right here. Or Bram. Bra-chan. Bra-chan is the cutest little thing. We're just going to put Bra-chan. I freaking love it. I think that's the most adorable thing possible. I'm just like, sunshine and rainbows. Give me all the things. But yeah, she's 10 years old. Fukuchi is probably thinking that whoever took the photo is like a grown-ass adult, and so they wouldn't be able to fit in the coffin, first of all. So that makes sense. But also, you would think, who in their right mind would hide in the coffin with Bram? And so it's like hiding in the place that's most suspect, right? Or hiding right under the nose, like in the most least suspected place. And I love that she's just sitting there like, oh my God. And so he's like, well, what do I do? And of course, what I love about it is Fukuchi is expecting this elaborate plan. And so he cuts to the worst conclusion. He's like, well, it could have been like a strobe light, or it could have been he thinks that it's all the work of Rampo. Rampo is getting all the credit for things he didn't even do, right? So I'm going to put Rampo up here because we're going to talk about him. But yeah, he's thinking Fukuchi, let me see here, Fukuchi believes that he is the mastermind behind all this. I don't even think Fukuchi thinks Dazai's on the table. Well, he does at the end. He thinks Dazai's on the table because the box is sealed. And so he thinks that it's really Rampo and Dazai behind it all, right? Because they've been employed by Fukuzawa. It's almost weird. I feel like one of the other reasons that Fukuchi has so much faith in Rampo being a formidable opponent is because Fukuzawa places so much faith in him, which is like total X vibes, being like, well, my old boyfriend really believes in Rampo, so he must be good. Which is fascinating to me that Fukuchi has so much respect for Fukuzawa and thinks so highly of him, despite believing that he's been kicked out of the inner circle. Which, the funny thing is, I don't even think Fukuzawa thinks of Fukuchi that way. It's so bizarre. But he's giving Rampo a lot of credit for things that Rampo didn't even have a hand in. Also, we did not see Jono with the vampire army. I'm like, what? Show. If you don't show Jono, why would Fukuchi just keep Jono in the wings if he knew he was a vampire? Have Jono help out if he's a vampire. I'm like, you're not being clever if you're making it obvious that Jono is either not a vampire, either one of two things. Jono is not a vampire. He's somehow gotten away from the ability, which is what I think is happening. And the show's just going to be like, Jono escaped. And I'm going to be like, well, the fact that he wasn't with Octagawa shows that he was not actually a vampire. Or he sadly is a vampire and Fukuchi's just put him off in the wings to use him like as a jump scare later on. And I'm going to be really upset. So even though it seems obvious, I hope that Fukuchi got out. I hope that he got out. That would be great if he did. But I don't know. The fact that we're not seeing anything is telling. So then we get these two. We get this senpai, this guy. He looks like there's like an old billboard by a city that I'm near that has like a lawyer on it. And he has an eye patch. It's like, have you been injured? It's like he is. He's like that lawyer in those advertisements. He's there along with this guy that looks like he's from Mortal Kombat. And I was like, I was expecting them to be pretty, like, important characters because our job's literally to save the world, huh? We don't get what this is translated as, which is so frustrating, but I'm sure the comments will tell us what it says by the pilot. And so, yeah, they're clearly from the European Union, and they've come to help out. I'm very sad that they're already dead. I thought they'd have more impact and be more important characters, but nope. Not intriguing. So they're like, do we really stand a chance against a European military escort? And Rampo's like, well, obviously, who do you think I am? He's very like, well, duh, of course. Which is very in Rampo's character. He's like, of course, I can solve the crime. What have I been doing this whole time? And Atsushi's like, well, this is like a big military gifted crew. Isn't that going to be, a lot of trouble? And he's like, well, if they deliver the one order, it's all over. How many hours? How many days is it going to take to obstruct delivery? And then Rampo says it's going to take 1 second. I like that Rampo like frames it so dramatically, like 1 second. You're like, how? And then he's like, oh, we're gonna create a terrorist attack, and it's gonna scare them away. Which is honestly at this point pretty smart, because at this point you have nothing to lose. Like, you've not technically been proven innocent. Fukuchi still believes that you're there and enacting as part of the problem. And as far as the Europeans are concerned, they're still a terrorist group. So just play into it. Make a fake explosion. It didn't injure anybody. It didn't involve anything. It just destroyed some collateral property and then just scare them away. It was a pretty smart plan. I liked it. I also like the idea that with Kunikita, and we'll put him up here, with Kunikita, him being the one to blow up the bomb. I like that because, as we know, Kunikita doesn't have his notebook anymore. He doesn't have his ideals. Jono destroyed them. So that's interesting. That it's kind of like Kunikita's like getting a little bit of his wild side out because he can, right? So that's always fun. He's like, well, it'll be like running a schoolboy's errand. We just need them to think that it's too risky, retreat, and that we're terrorists. And then, of course, Fukuchi, he freaks out, being like, why is there an explosion? What's happening? Like, what if my plan's real? Fukuchi is normally he seems like someone that is very meticulous, and he's been planning his Shakespearean revenge since the 80s. So he's been taking, like, every precaution. But Aya has, like, thrown caution to the wind and like messed all of this up. And the best part about it is Aya is just this 10-year-old normal girl. She has no powers, but she has this conviction. She has conviction and kindness. And I love that. We were talking in the comments about this with several individuals. It wasn't just one person, but we were talking about how the show, one of the big themes is that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones that don't have any special superpowers. Like we talked about Sigma, the most dangerous person is an average man who's desperate. The whole idea of the old woman influencing Jono into having this pride of saving people. The idea that Dazai said, Oda was an assassin, but he wasn't anything special, right? He did have a really special ability, but, he wasn't this hacks OP person. And the idea that Dazai loves people that are just ordinary. Like Rampo. Rampo's an ordinary guy, but he's extremely intelligent. And that's what makes him special. I love that. I love that theme. And I love the idea that Aya, who's just this girl who was influenced by Kunikita saving her, wants to help out and do the right thing. And her only agenda is just helping the people that she cares about. That's all. That's all she's doing. No world domination, nothing crazy, nothing life-altering. And honestly, that's kind of like a lot of stories focus on that theme of you can't always do these giant big changes, these sweeping gestures. Like Fukuchi seems, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Fukuchi seems to want to create this peaceful state, but you just can't force people to change their free will. You can't make these grand sweeping gestures without causing some massive disruption. There's a give and take there. So sometimes it's better just to do little small good things that will have a domino effect and eventually cause a massive wave of change. And that's kind of what Aya is doing. And I love that. I love that the story is focusing on that. It's one of my favorite parts of this episode. But yeah, Fukuchi freaks out. He decides to leave. He's like, there's one certainty. I have to do something. And the thing about that's so great is that Fukuchi can't really use the time-traveling sword. He doesn't know what the hell he's going to use it on. What does he go back and change? He doesn't know what he needs to change. So I like that. I like that little, the time-altering sword has to have a purpose, and he has to know when and why he's using it. And if he doesn't, then it's really just a sword. He's like, I don't know what to change. So I like that. I like that kind of caveat that we get out of it. And then, yeah, without a doubt, the military escorts will determine that there are terrorists that may steal the one order and they're going to leave. Unlike Fukuchi, Europe has no reason to deliver it today. They can wait. So then the thing about it is, when did they say abort the delivery mission, and then we cut to Aya in the coffin. Who disturbs my slumber? I'm like, Brahm, you're a big old softie. Shut up. You've been stuck in the box too long. Maybe you were a badass warrior at one point, but at this point he's been stuck in this box so long, it's just like he doesn't even care anymore. He's just like, why am I saying all this? I don't know. I've just been stuck in this box lamenting my loneliness. Who disturbs my slumber? At the moment he said it in such a formal way, I was like, okay. Because he's like, she's this little kid. And he's like, depending on your answer, I may have you pay for that sin in blood. And she's like, what? Like, old man, what? In the coffin. And now Fukuchi doesn't. The one thing that I don't understand is the candy. They have a piece of candy, focused on in the foreground of this entire episode whenever Rampo's talking. That piece of candy is just right there in the foreground. Like, that little sweet. I don't know visually why it's there. I feel like it's symbolic of something. Like, why would you have the candy right there, like taking candy from a baby? Or is it supposed to tell us that the reward is right in front of us? I'm curious. It feels like it's probably from the manga, because why else would you do that? So I'm curious why the candy is there, other than to visually be like a thing where Atsushi and Rampo are separated by the door and the candy. Very curious. With no choice but to fend off our attacks, how long do you suppose he can protect Brahm? So, and then I like that Atsushi's like, oh, Rampo's getting a little creepy here. Rampo's getting a little bit devious. Rampo's used to solving crimes and undoing the villain's strategy, not coming up with some on his own. And Rampo's kind of just like, all right. I feel like Rampo is tapping into a little Dazai here, being like, we now not only have to solve the case, we have to create scenarios to confuse the enemy. So it's interesting to see Rompo like this. And him saying, no enemy can best my intellect. I'm like, oh man. But if I name one enemy who could fight back against me, it would be, and what I like about it is it's Fyodor. It's Fyodor. It's the idea, because I think Fukuchi is meticulous. He's a good strategist, obviously, but he's not like a genius. He's not Fyodor level of intelligent, I don't feel. I feel like Fukuchi is very smart. He's a very good military strategist, but he's not like that prodigy chess master level that Dazai and Fyodor are at alongside Rompo. I don't feel like Fukuchi is that, right? He's just freaking strong. That's what makes him dangerous. So yeah, my thing is with, how did they get poisoned? What was the deal with the coffee? Like, when were they poisoned? Because he's like an oil leak, and then he realizes it's blood. I'm like, when they have the blood? Like, when did this happen? Was it in the coffee I just had? Who would have done this? And like, why? And so then he's like, the plane's gonna crash, I'm losing consciousness. And then he looks back to the senpai, and he's already dead there too. So what happened? It really, that whole please no by him was actually really terrifying. I'm like, at least y'all were dead before you got blown up by Techo's attack. But also, like, so how did they get poisoned by the coffee? Who put the poisoned coffee in the airplane? Like, what? How did that happen? What's going on? Who did this? What is this? I don't know. It's so bizarre, right? So bizarre. And then, yeah, they both died. Like, what the hell? And then Techo comes to get alongside. He gets this, like, badass music. It says, evil begone. I'm like, what's so crazy is this show frames people in so many different lights. And it just makes everybody so gray that it, like, you think for a second, like, Techo and them come in like the heroes of the hour. And it's like, no, you're actually making this really bad. We don't want him to get the box, right? But then he uses plum blossoms and snow. Bones did a lot of budgeting to get that plane to go apart, right? They really did. And then Fukuchi gets the box. And she's like, Captain, you did it. And he's like, Rompo, can you hear me? The situation could not be worse. The plane was hurtling towards the airport, and the hunting dogs tore it apart and retrieved the one order from the wreckage. So they basically have it. We've lost. So then, yeah, what do we do, Rompo? What's our next move? And then Rompo hanging up the phone like, Rompo, what we doing? Like a thunderstrike on a summer evening, it struck me what we were up against. Okay, and then I'm like, poor guy, he left poor Kunikita on red. He just like hung up on him. I was like, what? Don't leave Kunikita hanging. But then what does he say here? That man, the demon who controls the surface from the underground. I do love the idea of Fyodor represented by a spider's web, and that he's like in the green tones and everything. Yeah, Fukuchi and Fyodor working together is absolutely terrifying, because I don't think either of them, I don't think Fukuchi nor Fyodor care for each other. They just mutually know they want to tear the world apart. And they're like, oh, so you have the same goal as me? Cool, well, we'll just work together towards that goal, I guess. But they're both terrifying in their own rights. And so it's like two people that should not work together teaming up. And so then, yeah, our defeat approached because we were unable to eliminate him. So Atsushi's gone now. Where did Atsushi go? The candy's still there, but Atsushi's gone. And so our defeat approached because we were unable to eliminate him. So the problem for Rompo at this point is that Fyodor is still around. Fyodor is with him in the picture. They can't win. Well, don't worry. Don't worry. Fyodor and Dazai are about to possibly kill each other, so we'll talk about that whole madness. I'm with Sigma. Poor Sigma's like, am I the only sane person here? And it's like, yes, you are, and you're not even a real person. So I kid. Sigma's a real boy. He just, was artificially created 3 days ago. It's fine. Or maybe I guess it's a week at this point. I guess he's a week old at this point. Even now, if we'd made just one more mistake, we would have lost the one order. Ah! So he's like, okay. And then there's this, and Fukuchi's like, what the hell is this? Why is it shrouded in dimensional disruption ability? What is this? What is this dimensional disruption ability? It's impossible to open. So the question is, who has sealed the box? Who sealed it up? I mean, was it someone in the clock tower? Was it Agatha Christie that sealed it up? Fukuchi blames Dazai, but I'm like, Dazai's been in prison this whole time. How did he get his hands on it? Who could have used the power to create a dimensional ability that locked up the box? No. I feel like Fyodor doesn't want Fukuchi to open it either. Maybe. Who knows? Fyodor just seems like he wants chaos. So, but I'm curious who actually sealed the box. If it's related to Agatha Christie's power, if it's related to Fyodor, if it really is Dazai that's responsible. Like, what is the deal? Why are things the way that they are? I'm so fascinated, and Fukuchi's just pissed off. I just love Dazai's his little like wink to the camera, like as Fukuchi imagines him, like, What's interesting is Fukuchi thinks of Dazai, Atsushi subconsciously thinks of Dazai, and now we have Ongo thinking of Dazai, which Dazai being like Ongo's shoulder devil is absolutely perfect. I feel like Oda is Ongo's shoulder angel, Dazai is the shoulder devil. So I like the idea of a more reckless Ongo. An Ongo that's not so bound by the restriction of their position. I'm like, just get a taste of it, honey. Just go with it. Things are chaos anyway. Why not release a little anarchy into the system at this point, right? God, I love the OP so much. It's great. So speaking of which, Ongo is trying to convince them that they just don't need to give the one order to Fukuchi, because they're like, we should not unlock the one order until the vampire forces attack. So somebody on Europe's side then is locking the box, right? Somebody on Europe's side is responsible for it being locked. So I'm thinking it's Agatha Christie or somebody has the power to seal it. And they're like, we don't need to release it or do anything with it until the very last moment if it is absolutely necessary. So what we have here is the idea that Ongo, doing what Dazai does best, convincing him from beyond the cell, has convinced him to convince the Europeans to keep the box sealed until the vampires attack. Meanwhile, Fukuchi, put him right here. Fukuchi wants the box, so he wants to get the vampires to attack. But to do that, he needs BRAM. And meanwhile, BRAM is off with Aya. So it's great. It's just set up this chain of events where Fukuchi can't get the thing, and the thing he needs to get the thing is no longer something in his possession. It's like, it's a great amount of chaos, right? So he's like, just delay it until the judgment trumpets are sound. And he's like, I'm sure Europe is furious about it as well. A hero he may be, but on the other hand, the one order to give it to another nation. And you're like, okay, like Ongo is playing at the fact that the European nations have pride, and the fact that they would be giving it up to another country. They're kind of like, we really don't want to have to do that unless we absolutely have to. And so it's smart for Ongo to play into that kind of selfishness, right? And they're like, I want to be clear that this plan was determined by Tanada and the Gifted Special Operations Division. So whoever Ongo is talking to, I thought it was the chief at first. Whoever he's talking to wants to know, like, this was approved by your chief, right? The guy that you work for. Can you get him on the line? And Ongo's like, no. And then he looks over and sees that the chief is still like on life support. And then I love the idea that he's just looking there at him being like, what would he do in this situation? And Dazai is saying, the time is ripe for a lie. I love the shoulder devil, like just bearing over him being like, just do it. Just lie about it. It's so good. It's so good. I freaking love it. So, yep. And he says, and I like that Ongo's like, look, if this turns out to be all folly, I'm not only going to like get dismissed from the agency, the division, but I'm going to be a political criminal. And I love that he looks at the picture. When he held the picture up, I thought it was going to be of all three of them at Bar Lupin. I really did. And he smiles saying, I bet you're laughing right about now, you nasty man. I like that he flicks the photo of Dazai. Also, why does he have just a photo of Dazai's face? Why? I wanted it to be the Bar Lupin pic with him and Oda. I think that would have been more appropriate. Meanwhile, so Dazai's insurance policy paid off. But it's still the case that the order was stolen. The one order was stolen in its box. So yeah, the problem is the one order is still in Fukuchi's possession. That's a problem. It thankfully, thanks to the insurance of Ongo, hasn't been opened yet. But Fyodor is still too dangerous. Fyodor is kind of the weird wild card in all of this because Fyodor does not match at all. Like poor Sigma. Sigma is sane. He's just along for the ride. Nikolai's batshit crazy, but he seems manageable. As long as you kind of get in the parameters of him, you can somewhat control Nikolai, maybe. And then you have, obviously, the hunting dogs who are all obsessed with following Fukuchi's orders. So Fukuchi has a pretty good handle on everybody, except Bram, who's gone with Aya right now. But Fyodor's a wild card. And part of me feels like Fukuchi intentionally got Fyodor and Dazai out of the way, not only to get Dazai out of the way because that seemed necessary for his plans to work, but also because Fyodor's too much of a wild card. Like, I feel like Fyodor does some things and Fukuchi's just like, whatever. As long as it benefits me, I'm not going to say no. But the question is going to be, if Fyodor lives through this, is there going to be a part of or a point where Fyodor no longer thinks that he needs to follow Fukuchi, or that Fukuchi thinks he doesn't need Fyodor anymore? And then what do we do? So it's interesting. Yeah, Fyodor is very dangerous, and he's very much unpredictable. And he's just sitting there, just smug as a pancake, just having a great time. And then these two, they talk about how there's been an intruder in level 1 delivery bay. The anti-gifted fast response squad. The Hecton chairs, have been eliminated. Okay, so there's somebody walking there. There's somebody walking there, but I don't think that's Nikolai. Is Chuya coming? There's a hat there. Is Chuya gonna go? What? Is Chuya there? They talk about, I think I see red hair there. Is Chuya gonna come and help out Dazai? We haven't seen Chuya in a long time. What? Who is this? Who is that? That looked like Chuya. I wonder if Nikolai and Sigma were a fake out because there was just one person in the hallway there. And I'm like, if that is Chuya, I don't want Chuya to be a vampire. I hope that's not the case. But I'm like, if Chuya comes to save Dazai, what are we gonna do with this? And then Dazai's like, I'm bored now. It was fun when we had things to talk about, but I don't want to be here anymore. We're out of stuff to talk about, so it's boring. He's like, maybe it's time to do the thing. And he's like, the thing? And then, oh my God, I cannot tell you, Miyano Mamoru, I love him as a voice actor. Him as Light Yagami is still, I think, his best role, period. I love him as Light Yagami, but he does this little giggle. Like when he looks, he goes, like that little giggle. And the way Miyano Mamoru does it, it is the cutest and creepiest thing simultaneously. And I could have it on repeat over and over again in a loop. I just cannot express in words how perfect it is, where he's like, we're going to have this little plan. Isn't it fun? Let's go. And then he's just like, and he looks like he's like, one of us dies. Like this game that he plays. Okay, so Dazai knew about the game. He knew this was coming, right? Did he orchestrate this? Did he get Nikolai to come into this because he knows Nikolai's a yandere? What? He's like, one of us needs to die now. And I'm like, wait, what? And the way that he just looks like a cat that ate the canary. He looks so sexual there. I'm like, why is Dazai looking like sex on a stick, talking about dying? I was like, we all know Dazai has been suicidal since season 1. We shouldn't be surprised that he'd be excited about this, but what is happening? And he's like, one of us dies. And the Fyodor's like, now you're speaking my language. Like, because he's just chaotic like that, right? He's like, yes, sure. And he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, that's a fantastic idea. He's like, right? The surface is abuzz about the end of the world. If the two of us end up being the last ones alive, that'd be stupid. And he's like, I agree. Maybe it's time to escape. And he's like, Fyodor? And he's like, oh, and then that's when Dazai ends up going, yep, the spatial thing where he was able to get him out. And then, like, his magic, breakout magic successful. I love that Sigma's just sitting there like, I hate my life. Why am I here? I've been stuck with this crazy person for the last... We've been on a 5-hour road trip and I hate it. I've never related to someone more than Sigma in this episode. Because he's just like, I don't know what to do. Dazai-kun's ability only disables any special ability he touches. So in other words, as long as he doesn't touch the portal itself, I can still pull him through spatial splices. And he's like, applause for my assistant. And Sigma's like, why are you calling me your assistant? Shouldn't you tell him what's going on? And he's like, oh, no worries. So the question is, how much of this did Dazai foresee coming? Because he talks about a game where one of us dies, and they end up playing Nikolai's game. So how much of this did Dazai anticipate? And how did he anticipate this? There's stuff that we as the audience don't know yet, and I'm so freaking curious. He's like, oh, no worries. He's like, oh. And they're like, so that's what's going on. He's like, they get it already. Why did you break us out of our cells? And then, of course, he's like, oh, I missed you, bestie. I'm like, from here on in, from this point on in the episode, it's perfection. From this point on in the episode, I was like, nope, hitting all the beats, checking all the boxes, making all the friends, doing all the things, happy as a lamb. I was like, nope, love it. I missed you, bestie. And Fyodor's like, what the fudge? You insane shippers, I'm sure, just went wild with this, had the best time. We're like, oh, this is checking off all of our boxes. And he's like, I'm so glad you're safe. My heart's going to burst. And Sigma's like, I've had to listen to this shit for 5 hours on our road trip. I just love that Sigma's like, I've had to listen to him like tell me all about his fan fiction he's writing about you and him being together. It's like a self-reader fan fiction. He's like, I don't want to read any more. And he's like, oh my God. And he's like, why am I here? Do you even need to ask? And Dazai's like, what is that? He's like, I'm here to murder you. I was like, oh my God, yes. And Fyodor's like, aw. I just like, what is this? What is this relationship? What is this relationship? Why is Fyodor into the yandere thing? Is Fyodor a masochist and you have a yandere and a masochist in a relationship? Is that what this is? Is that why Fyodor's like so excited? He's like, I'm so intrigued now. And he's like, wow. Dazai saying wow at all of this is like, Dazai's like, wow, I wish I could find somebody that would try to fulfill my wishes too. And again, Sigma's like, I've had to listen to this all day. Why are we here? He's like, the desire to save one's friend is strong. He's like, thus I will overcome it with unwavering resolve. A true display of human free will. I like the Dazai's like, I like your friends. They're batshit crazy and I'm into it. And Fyodor's like, shh. But he's like, therein lies the philosophical conundrum. To kill Fyodor now would be fulfilling an impulse to prove my own free will. But I don't want to do that. But it might only be further evidence of animalistic emotion. He's like, I've contemplated this mind-rending problem and arrived at a conclusion. A plan to satisfy both of these desires. And Sigma's like, what are we doing? We're going to have a prison break. Uh-huh. With the two of you. And Dazai's like, you really have some awesome friends. Dazai's like, man, not only did your friends get us out of prison, but they're going to help us break out of the entire facility. This is exactly what I needed. Awesome. God, I love this episode. This is just the best. And Fyodor's like, right? Like, let's just go with it. And so then we come back to Bram, who interrupts my slumber. Who are you? God, I love this interaction. This conversation is the best. He's like, I may not spare you. And she's like, what? She's like, and he's like, I cannot hear you. And then with the moment it went to the flashback where he's like, who do you think I am? I was like, no, I know exactly where this is going. He's going to give this big long-winded monologue and she's going to be like, can we be friends? And he's like, what? Like, you know, he's like this big evil dog and it's the cartoon with the big hulking dog and the tiny kitten. That's exactly what this is. Brahm is the big like pit bull bulldog in the one cartoon, and Aya is the little kitten that like snuggles up next to him and purrs, and he's like, I guess I'll let you live. Ah, I love it. Who do you think I am? I love these, like, I am the master of darkness. He's like, your life is not but fleeting morn dew in the moments before cockcrow. I love that he's such a boomer. And she's like the most Gen Z person or Gen Alpha or whatever. And she's like, I have no idea what you just said. I love it. No, he literally is a boomer and she's like Gen Alpha. It's the best cross-generational duo ever. She's like, what's a cockcrow? I am the Lord. And he says, basically, I am the Lord and the storm. God, I love it. Brahm is my favorite, I think, of this season. The heavens and the hells. Wherefore... I don't care anymore. I love it because you know that Brahm said those lines to like all of his opponents for years and years and years. And now with this 10-year-old kid, he's like, I don't see the point. It's so good. It's so good. And he's like, good night. I'm done. And then she's like, hey, now wait a minute. She's like, you've got no body. She's like, how do you wash your face? And he's like, I don't. And she's like, gross. Also, I like the idea that the sword is embedded into his brain. That's why he can't get away from it. Makes sense. That's also why he can be brandished like a puppet the whole time. But I love she says here, she says, you're so different from how you seemed at first. So she instantly says, like Aya, this 10-year-old kid points out what any kid could point out to an adult, being like, well, you seemed one way, but you're actually another. So you're not as bad or scary as I thought you were. Like a 10-year-old has to teach us these life lessons, right? And he's like, what do you mean? Aren't you with that scary old guy? And he's like, no, he's my arch nemesis. He took from me the ability to control my kin with the holy sword. She's like, arch nemesis? So that means the enemy of my enemy is also my friend, right? She basically made that conclusion. So interesting. So she's like, okay, the holy sword. She's like, what's your name? He's like, Count Brahm. She's like, I'm just going to call you Bra-chan. And I'm like, yes, this is the best thing ever. And then she wants all the answers. And then he's like, well, I could tell you, but it's going to be a long story. I'm glad, for a second, I thought she was going to go back into the coffin. I'm glad that wasn't the case, because then he goes back and he's like, bro, I'm going to use you. Fukuchi just goes off the rails. Fukuchi, when things don't go his way, suddenly has like a mind-altering panic attack and decides, I'm just going to destroy the world. I'm just going to like have my vampires like kill all the people. And I'm like, whoa. I can kind of see why Fukuzawa did not want to be a part of you, because he's like, whoa, you need to calm the frick down. So yeah, he has a moment and then realizes that Brahm is gone. He's been stolen. I freaking love it. And I love that she just carries him on her back in a backpack. Her carrying Brahm like a backpack is absolutely hilarious. And then Fukuchi's like, I can't unleash the vampires because and I can't get the one order and I can't use the page. My plan is all but not because of a 10-year-old girl and her kindness. I just like, oh. And so of course, like he's walking with Octagawa because of his ability and the other vampire police, right? But we don't see Jono anywhere. He suspects that it's somebody that Jono's working with. The thing of it is that if he had kept Jono alive, Jono probably would have revealed that that wasn't the case. But he didn't. If he had kept him from becoming a vampire, rather. So then we come back to Sigma, who is like, I don't know what I'm witnessing. I love that he says, I am Sigma. Like he's writing in his journal, his diary entry. Day 47, after an 8-hour card ride with this crazy psychopath who's talking about all the different things he'd do to Fyodor in his own fan fiction, I'm now watching as they're like having lethal injection parties. It's like Dazai's version of a Botox party. It's what is a man of the casino. I'm aware that I come from very special origins. That being said, I can't help but wonder, because you have Dazai, Nikolai, and Fyodor. So this will cause death in half an hour, right? Yep. If I'm the only, you'll be bleeding out from every orifice of your body. It's a work of art. Am I the only sane person in the room? So basically, Nikolai is responsible for the plane crashing. Nikolai had the lethal injection, put it in their coffee, and the two in the plane bled to death. So it was Nikolai's fault that it happened. We can rightfully assume. So they're giving them these injections, and I'm like, in 30 minutes, they're going to die, one of them. And he's like, the game is simple. Whoever escapes from Mersalt first wins. And I'll have the two of you take this injection, and only the first to escape will receive the antidote. Which means, in half an hour, either Dazai-kun or I will be dead. And he's like, I apologize, Dazai-kun. I really just wanted to kill Fyodor, but you've got drug into this. But this is the only way I can get him to take the poison. So yeah, I like the idea that Nikolai's like, well, I can't just kill him because then that's no fun. I want him to be an active participant in this murder. And he's like, but he won't take the poison unless there's an incentive. And you almost dying is an incentive. And Fyodor and Dazai are like so borderline insane that they're just like, they're so bored with life that they're like, let's just do it. And I'm like, why? No, this is like the worst thing. These are like the Sigma don't get any ideas. It's like Sigma is the outsider that's like discovered this cultish group of, it's like a cultish fraternity, and Sigma's refusing to drink the Kool-Aid. Keep on refusing, man, because these three are absolutely bonkers. And he's like, why apologize? It's a fantastic opportunity, a gift from heaven, indeed. But it's also sad to think my chest buddy will be gone in half an hour. Like, these two men are they're too smart for their own good. So they're like, let's just have a battle to the death the only way we know how to, and outmatch each other. I'm like, what the fudge? Why? To think my chest buddy will be gone in half an hour. Oh my God, I can't, nope. So, and Fyodor, who doesn't care, he just wants a challenge by it. He's like, are you really sure you're going to win? What other conclusion could there be? And then they're just sitting there laughing about the injection. Now, are they taking the lethal injection? It doesn't show them like, it shows them with the syringe pressed up against their arms. But are they actually taking the lethal injection or not? Because Sigma's just sitting there being like, oh my God, these guys are like laughing it up, taking lethal injections. What is wrong with this picture? Many things. And then Nikolai says, time for the apostatic Nikolai game. Oh my God, let's begin. So if Chuya's there, the question is Chuya there? Will Chuya help Dazai? Is that going to be the case? Is Chuya going to try to help Dazai get out of this? I don't know. I feel like Chuya would slap and be like, why did you take a lethal injection, you moron? Atsushi would be horrified, right? So then there's this emergency announcement where they're like, we're escorting all visitors. And like, nobody notices the vampires. Like, nobody notices these vampires here. And Aya's like, dang it, how are we going to get out? And Brahm's like, take me back to my coffin. I want to go to sleep now. And he's like, oh, why would I help you, you little thief? And she's like, oh, I see. He's like, your attitude's become insolent. I love that she like takes this sword and like tries to get him out of it. And he's like, you fool. The sword won't come out. It's embedded into my brain. And she's like, meaning, he says, it hurts a lot when you pull on it. So technically, it's not impossible to take out the sword, but a 10-year-old's not going to do it, right? And if you try to pull him away from the sword, it's going to cause some brain damage that will maybe... we were talking about this, Sarah Linda and I were talking about it, because it's like, well, could you kill him with the sword by stabbing his brain? And I was like, I don't know how they're going to kill Brahm, because he's immortal. And a lot of times in narratives, immortality equals regeneration, but I don't think that's the case in this one. I don't think that I don't think the Holy Sword is preventing Brahm from regenerating. I think the Holy Sword is just allowing, him to be controlled and wielded by Fukuchi, like if it has some kind of supernatural power like the time travel sword. But just because Brahm is immortal doesn't mean he can regenerate. Just like how Atsushi can regenerate, but he's not immortal. So Brahm just like, he keeps living even when his limbs get hacked off, but he can't regrow them, right? And he's like, what a foolish girl you are. I am the Archduke of Darkness. I was like, oh, come off of it. Right? I was like, yes, king of demons, enemy of man. And she's like, well, I wanted her to have like an Eowyn moment where she's like, I am no man. And that sort of ties with Aya, the idea of I am an enemy of man. And the idea that she says, you're right. She's like, you're talking to a complete idiot. She's like, look, I'm shaking. All I have is determination that I built up over 10 years to never run away from this kind of crisis. And that's when Brahm's kind of like, wait, you're only 10? Like, you're just a kid? And she's like, you're not even old enough. He says, you're not even old enough to use a loom. I was like you'd expect her to be like sitting there like spinning thread and making like weaving a tapestry. He's like, you're not, 'tis but a child. She can barely carry a broom and weave a loom. Like, Brahm is adorable because he's so old fashioned. And he's like, why does such a girl fight? You know, because Brahm's not probably used to this, like a girl fighting like that. And she says, why? And then we go back to her past with her dad, which is awful. And the idea that the dad was saying like, oh, your mother could cook and clean and sew and man, your mother could do all the shit for me, but you can't. Your mom cooked for me, cleaned for me, managed the finances. I'm like, wow, you're really good for something then, aren't you? You know, and the fact that she's not there, so she must have died. And then him just like getting up in her face. She could do everything. She was the perfect woman. And she's like, but justice, like she wants to do something. And he says, you are a failure of a woman. And her like saying that. I love that look on her face. She's like, all I've got is determination. Brachan. I love the idea that he says that he's the enemy of all men, but she's a woman and supposedly she's a failure of a woman, but she's the one controlling Brachan, Count Brahm, the one of the most OP hacks ability users. That's why I need help of the people from the people of that world. I'll do anything in return. And he's like, in return, there's little a commoner could offer. And then she starts crying. She puts on the tears, puppy dog tears. And he's like, well, I mean, I suppose if I had to get anything, you couldn't offer me this. But I think he says, what does he say? The treasure box. There's one treasure I desire. She's like, what is it? Ultimate mechanical orchestra of which I hear rumors. The legendary treasure containing musicians in the box the size of a fist. I love the idea when he says hear rumors. Brahm's been stuck in that stupid coffin all this time, and nobody's been able to talk to him. He's been all alone. And so Fukuchi won't give him the day. If Fukuchi gave him a radio, the world would have been over. But Fukuchi's not kind like that. He just treats Brahm like a tool and an enemy. And she's like, oh, you mean a radio? And he's like, it will soothe me in my long slumber within my coffin. Provide me with this treasure and I'll offer you my flesh. I was like, oh my God. I just beside myself. She goes, oh, a radio. And he's like, oh, see, you can't offer me such things, can you? And she's like, well, not a radio, but like the one my dad used. I mean, we're in the 21st century. I got something better. It's called like an iPod. And then she plays the OP, right? And she plays it and she's like, look, she's like, I've got 200 online channels on my phone. You can find just about any music if you pay for it. And Brahm's like, oh my God, yes. He's like, may I have this? And she said, yeah, it's all yours. A little 10-year-old girl controlled one of the most powerful ability users in the series because she gave him some earbuds and was kind and shared music with him. And he's like, are you a goddess? I could not love it more. It's absolutely amazing. It's the best. It's absolutely the best. I'm all for it. I love it so much. This is great. It's great. So there's a little bit of hope. Brahm may be listening to Aya because she's gave him music. She actually did something that Fukuchi could not. I'm like, what? So I love the idea that Brahm is listening to a 10-year-old girl. Good on it. That's like the one hopeful thing. I don't know what to think about this game. If Fyodor and Dazai gave themselves lethal injections and they've got 30 minutes to live, what do we do with that? What do we do with that? Like, I feel like Chuya is running around there somewhere because I'm pretty sure that was him. But what can Chuya do? How do we do this? And what about Nikolai? Sigma's just sitting there like, I don't know what's happening. We don't know where Atsushi is. Rampo is sitting there mulling over all of the options. We don't know where Atsushi's gone. We don't know what everybody else in the ADA is doing. We don't know about Mori and Fukuzawa. We only have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We have 5 episodes left to do something. And they're going to leave us on something because the manga's still going. I will say this. This may be one of my favorite episodes of the season, only because it gave me the laughs and the heart that I needed so desperately. So kudos to you, show. Thanks for doing that. Oh my God, y'all. I'm really excited. I hope y'all are too, but yeah. So I hope y'all enjoyed this reaction discussion. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below, but I hope y'all also have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Bungo Stray Dogs. Bye!